Hello, welcome to episode 9 of the Housing Sector Podcast, The Golden Web with Suz from SHAC. In this podcast, we are discussing just how incestuous is the housing associations. Are they all linked together? Are there too many MPs with too many fingers in too many other pies to have the ability to properly offer oversight and governance? Do they have the strength to step in, or are we in a rush to just build too many new homes because that fills that quota whilst allowing bad management, misappropriation of funds? Are we failing to support the residents in these new homes in our rush to build new homes? And is it all too connected? Are there too many big fish in what is quite a small pond? All this and more on this episode of the Housing Sector Podcast.
The Housing Sector Podcast, Episode 9, The Golden Web with Suz from SHAC.
Hi Suz, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Hello there. Yes, very good. Thank you. Thanks for having us on your show again.
Oh, it's a show. That's the first time we called that. How exciting. I keep bragging to my wife that the talent is recording now. She gets very annoyed at that. Today we're talking about something that you did a little while back and now post the election, it's more relevant now, and that's your golden web. And they can find it, and I will put a link there so people can find that themselves. I'll do that via the QR code. And the first bit I want to ask about Gavin Barwell and Clarion. That's a good place to start. So what do we know about Gavin Barwell?
So well, the sort of background on the Golden Web is really about sort of tracking some of the relationships that are there at the top of this kind of housing association establishment, and we'll unpick some of those a bit more. But I think people will remember, or may not remember, but Gavin Barwell was actually the minister, the housing minister. He was MP for Croydon, but he was housing minister between 2010 and 2017, so quite a decent period of time. He was an MP for that long, so kind of knew his way around Parliament. Would have had lots of connections in Parliament, and he served under Theresa May, and he also served as housing minister. Until he lost his seat on the 8th of June in 2017. And this was just before the Grenfell fire, obviously, kind of hit the headlines, those horrific images that I'm sure all of us will always remember, those horrific images. And basically, Barwell had overseen, the deregulation of planning, of a lot of the safety checks and things like that. There'd actually been in existence since the Great Fire of 1666. It'd been that long that they'd had these safety measures in place, to stop the sort of spread of fire across very populous areas. They were done away with by the coalition government, and subsequently by sort of Theresa May. They all kind of took down the level of safety, and we ended up with Grenfell. So once he was booted out of his seat as an MP, he immediately went and began to serve on the board of Britain's largest, as it was then, Britain's largest housing association. So you can imagine the kind of advice and guidance and governance that he was offering. That's the kind of person that is seen as a really good catch for a housing association. Not because they've got some track record of making things better for people, heaven forfend that should be one of the criteria, but just because they are so well connected politically and with other housing associations, different parts of government, different local authorities. So really, it's about what we talk about in the Golden Web article is really about and the subsequent one, which is about the picture after the general election, is really about this kind of prioritizing of these people, not because they've got any background experience in actually, demonstrating that they really know how to serve the communities that are living in their homes, but because they're just really well connected people.
And that they know all the ways of getting around the laws and the regulations.
Yeah. It's that simple, I think.
And what's happening with Clarion at the moment? Is he still on the board at Clarion?
He's still, as far as I know, he's still on the board of Clarion. I mean, Clarion has had a really bad time of it. Over the last 2 or 3 years. They had an outage, for example, their computer systems were hacked, and they had an outage on their computer systems that lasted over 5 months, which is really significant. And really, again, says that this is not a well-governed organisation that has thought through the kind of emergency backup plans that are needed. During that period, people, for example, couldn't check their rent accounts, so they couldn't see whether the money that they were paying in out of their wages every month was actually going into their rent accounts. They couldn't get through to people. They had to use social media, to try and get repairs done and things like that. So it really was quite a significant period, and they were getting all these bad, very bad judgments from the housing ombudsman, but lo and behold, the regulator still gave them the top grade. And of course, Claire Miller, who is the chief executive of Clarion, also served for a very long period of time as the director of regulation at the social housing regulator. So again, we can see these connections in play. And we're not in the article, we're not accusing anybody of not doing their job. But it's just that if you've come from inside an organisation, if you've come from inside a regulator, you know how to work the system. I mean, that's just always going to be the case, isn't it?
Yeah. And I always think it's very incestuous. And I understand it's a reasonably sized sector and you're going to move around within it. But it seems that, as you indicated in that Golden Web article, they're all too connected and they're all too friendly. And I find it quite annoying when I'm off to meet up with some old colleagues at a different event in London and this and that. And you think it's a very small incestuous pond, isn't it? Where they're all very big fish in there. So you mentioned there in the article the 5 MPs post-election who you have your concerns about. Who are they?
Yes, so we've got from the general election that took place obviously at the start of this month. There are 5 new MPs who have all come directly from housing associations. They include some of the really big ones. Again, Clarion right at the top. So Andrew Lewin MP, he used to work or previously, up until the time that he became an MP, he was working as a director at Clarion Housing, and he's now representing Welwyn Hatfield. Alan Strickland was a director at Southern Housing, which again is a very, very big housing association. We get an enormous amount of complaints about Southern Housing. I mean, they really are on the naughty step as far as SHAC is concerned. And then the others are from smaller housing associations. So David Smith from Oasis, Sarah Russell, Wythenshawe, which is quite a small community housing association, and then Lee Dillon, who was actually not Labour. All of the others were Labour. Lee Dillon has gone to is an MP for the Liberal Democrats, and he was with Sovereign Network Group, which again fairly recently merged Sovereign and Network, and really became a big housing association. So these people are going to have the ear of people, and it's like you say, it's the kind of formal connections that they will make, being in the same meetings together, discussing the same issues. But around that, there's going to be a whole load of informal stuff, isn't there? Going to the same gyms, using the parliamentary gym, sitting around in the cafe, having a cup of tea and just having those kind of water cooler chats with each other. They'll be able to sort of influence the way the regulation goes in the future, the kind of regulatory framework, the funding framework, who gets the money, how they get the money, what kind of products are out there. And when groups like ours are campaigning and trying to get a message across about, for example, the level of inaccuracy in service charges or the lack of responsiveness, they'll be saying, oh, yes, but, and they'll be downplaying what we're saying to them. So I think for us, what it means is that we are going to have to work really hard and produce the evidence, show the evidence that we've got really to show that these are real issues, so that they can't just use their little influences inside government to completely combat everything that we're saying, really.
You see, I always think that when I've struggled and when I've had residents come to me with complaints and I've said, okay, here's your complaint, let's try and get your local MP, who's your councillor. And some are pretty good. They always show their support, but I'm always concerned that the lack of bite they have and the inability they have to drive any real change. And I've always thought that was down to the government's need for new homes and the fact that they've made this devil's
Yeah.
pact with the providers to build new homes, which fills that remit that they've promised the electorates. Do you think that's the case? It's new homes over quality homes, or do you think it's more about, lining their own pockets?
No, I think the new homes sort of piece that sits behind that, as you say, because with all of these things, you've got to follow the money, haven't you?
Mm.
And government doesn't want and is saying that it can't afford to invest in building social housing through councils, which, although it's got lots of problems, is still the most democratic form of providing social housing because at least you can vote your councillors out.
Yeah.
We can't vote the board of Clarion or Green Square Accord or any of the other housing associations. We have no control over who they are. They get in, brought in, parachuted in usually from somewhere, and we don't have any control. Tenants and residents don't have any control over that.
Despite being the
And
major
government, as
stakeholder.
you,
So
is what? Sorry.
despite being the major stakeholders, if you think
Exactly.
about it,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you think about the grant that goes for house
Mm.
building, plus the amount that goes in benefits, the benefit payments to cover rents and service charges, that amounts to a huge amount of money coming from the taxpayer, and yet we've got absolutely no say over what they do, who they appoint, how they're governed, except through the legislation. And I think this is where it becomes really dangerous because these people will be in a position of deciding what new legislation goes through in relation to housing associations. So whether, when they were getting deregulated or they brought in some new regulatory measures, all of those will be, scrutinized. And, these people will have a voice in Parliament to make the arguments. And we haven't got, who's speaking for us, who's speaking for
Mm.
the tenants and residents, who's in Parliament saying this is the other side of the story. And there are good MPs. I don't want to, I'm sure these will be good MPs as
Yeah.
well. So I'm not saying that, they're all going to be just giving one side of the story and not representing their constituents, because clearly some will. But it means we have to give those MPs that information. We have to keep feeding them information about what it's really like, what's really happening on the ground, and not allowing sort of these other voices really to dominate, I think.
Is there a fear that the likes of Clarion, for example, are just too big to fail? If Clarion fails, then what are the government going to do? It is then a crisis that cannot be hidden anymore. Do you think that's
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
the reasoning?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that's part of the reasoning. So if you have a small housing association that looks like it's about to go under,
Mm.
what government will do, what the regulator will get involved in, and other people within government would get involved in, is finding a takeover association. So we've seen that time and time
Yeah.
again, with smaller associations become part of a bigger association. Probably the biggest where it happened recently, I think, would be One Housing Group, which was getting into difficulty, had a lot of problems financially, and was taken into, became part of Riverside after quite a long period of negotiation, actually. And they never said that was why. They never said it was because One Housing Group was in difficulty. One Housing Group, which was run at the time by somebody who used to work for the Housing Corporation at one time, as it was. So again, kind of part of this golden web, and then went on to another post in another housing association. So they got taken over by Riverside, which is much bigger and was in a financially, much healthier position. But what would you do if it was one of the really big ones that got into serious difficulty? And I think that's why all of regulation now, more or less, is concentrated on looking after the financial health, or kind of giving assurances around the financial health of the organization. So the governance grade that they give really only relates to the governance of the finances of the association, or that's been the picture for quite a long time. And as long as they're financially healthy, as long as they can draw down these big loans from the finance sector, they can keep building. And as you say, that it's that bottom line on how many new homes are being built. Doesn't matter how many are for cheaper rents, for the lower cost rents. It doesn't matter. That figure can be hidden, but the overall headline is what they're after. We've built so many thousand new homes, and they often don't tell you how many are for the low cost rent, do they?
No, or how many they're selling off because they've fallen to
Yeah,
dilapidation at the end of it. I was researching something for Green Square Accord for an earlier podcast about their downgrading and their response to it. And one of the things was saying that there aren't so many housing associations in that sort of power, that ability to buy out and support now, because they also don't want
yeah,
to put that risk on their books, which I think is very
yeah,
much happened with Green Square when they merged with Accord. They've brought on all this dilapidated stock that they just can't fix now. So they're now burdened
yeah.
with that, hence that sell off. Yeah, again, it's always so messy, isn't it? And there's no clear cut route to any solutions that we need. In the meantime,
Yeah.
residents are left suffering.
I think it should be a worry to people, about just how much independence is there within the regulator, and both the regulator and the investment arm, which is Homes England at the moment, that's what they're called. Both of those report to the same government department. And for example, even when Clarion was getting these really bad, stories coming out in the press, Eastfields,
Mm.
that, like I say, this massive outage that lasted for a very long time, with their computer system and things like that. When they were reviewed, they weren't downgraded. But then again, Michael Gove had just awarded a massive grant to them for house building. So it would have been a real embarrassment if, Clarion receiving the biggest grant out of the Affordable Homes Programme was then immediately downgraded by the regulator. And I do not believe that isn't part of the consideration when these gradings are given out, when these judgments are made about housing associations. I just wanted to say as well, you mentioned their Green Square Accord, and I thought you would particularly like this one because, of course, Ruth Cook, who is, chief executive of
Mm.
Green Square Accord, well, she previously worked in L&Q.
Mm-hmm.
She worked with Clarion. She worked with Midland Heart, which is another really big housing association, Warsaw Housing Group, Gloucestershire Housing Association. So, I mean, she's been all around the houses, excuse the
Yeah.
pun. And she's now sits on the National Housing Federation board as well, so she again is a very, very well connected individual, will know lots of people in the sector, know people working in the regulator, working in department, the government department. So, she is definitely one to pull out of the golden web, I think. So where is the independent scrutiny? I think that's the question we're all asking to some degree, isn't it?
She had a very short time at Clarion and I believe was off sick for most of it. And it's a cloud on her CV. I'm not quite sure. And I've asked and I've tried to find out. But anyway, she's taken a fatwa out on me. So
Oh, she. Well done, Ben.
that's right. I've managed to
Wear it as
upset
a
her.
badge of honor.
Exactly. Yeah. If I'll let you know that my brakes work on my car and I'm not suicidal. If that Ruth Cook is the one there. All right. Look, I don't think there's anything that we could spend hours talking about this, but when it comes to oversight, such as the regulatory the regulatory housing ombudsman to a certain extent, how independent can these groups be, and how much power can they wield? And I mean, Clarion were pulled in front of Parliament. I remember a
Yeah,
couple of years back.
yeah.
Um, Michael Gove has written to many landlords with a very stern letter, but that seems to be the weight of it. What can we do? What can the government do? What can the oversight do?
Yeah, and I mean it's a good question because it is, as you said right at the off, it is inevitable that people are going to move. People with expertise from having run a housing association are going to be the people that get taken on by the regulator and vice versa. The experience of working at the regulator will give you a head start if you go for a job, with a housing association. And if you look at other regulated sectors, there's a really good Netflix documentary I would quite highly recommend, actually, called Madoff, the Monster of Wall Street. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
all about, Bernie Madoff and
Mm.
how he ran this massive Ponzi scheme, basically. And there were people on the ground who were desperately trying to get the regulator to take notice of it. And the regulator really didn't take any notice of what these whistleblowers were saying, including, and he was actually due to be just before the kind of collapse, the financial collapse of 2008, which is what exposed it in the end. It wasn't the regulators' actions. He was actually due to become the chair of the board of the financial regulator in America. So it's really interesting, and it is about that lack of independent scrutiny. And I think that really should serve as a warning to us. And I'm not suggesting that anything on that scale is taking place here. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I think we have to ask about the checks and balances that are in place. What checks and balances are in place? Where is the voice of the tenants and residents in all of this? And at the moment, we're not seeing that on the boards, and on the boards of housing associations. Nobody is boasting about the fact that they grew up in social housing, and that is their background, and that's what they're committed to. Where is government listening to the tenants and residents? How are they listening to those? So I think what all they can do under the kind of current system, we would want a change of the system completely. But under the current system, they could build in a lot of other ways, a lot of different ways for tenants and residents, not just to kind of sit in a bit of an echo chamber and talk about their problems, but to really get heard. That their evidence, their sort of testimony is given as much weight as the chief executives and the board members, the chair of the board of these housing associations. And I think at the moment, it's the case that a tenant and resident says something, well, they're just a tenant and resident. But when the chief executive says something, we'll listen to them. And again, kind of looking at other scandals, we saw that with the post office, didn't we? When it was one person's word against another, the postmasters were ignored in favour of, the executives of the post office. And I think we suffer from that to a certain extent in this sector as well.
Well, my naivety, I thought when I started reporting issues just with my own land or Green Square Court, I thought, well, they'd be very open to this, to finding out what was going wrong. And the lengths they continue to go to keep me silenced. And the housing sector, which is, I've now put out as, come on, let's bridge this gap. Let's give the tenants a platform to speak on. And yet the pushback I sort of get for doing so. And you think, well, as you know from SHAC, why are you so afraid to hear our voices? What is it that you don't want to hear? Because you can't fix your mistakes if you're not going to listen to them. And they've got their blinkers on and they keep on going. And my fear is it will take another Grenfell before people start going, or an ITV drama premiere. It will take that before the tenants really are listened to, which is why it's great. So tell me a bit about your protests at the weekend.
Yeah, so we've been doing over the summer. We've had a protest outside. We've done 2 housing associations across several Saturdays, which sounds a bit weird doing it on a Saturday because obviously the offices, their offices are generally closed. But it's really just so that anybody or most people should be able to come along if they want to. And it's been really great because we've met up with activists and we've been able to bring activists together. The one over the weekend, with Peabody, for example, was absolutely cracking. We had several different people from different estates met each other for the first time. So we were having those conversations, people supporting each other. So it just really kind of strengthens the bonds of those networks between people, as well as making, we got lots of fantastic images. It was really sunny, unlike the Hyde one where we got rained on quite a lot. So we've got some really fantastic images and we'll be using those on social media over the coming weeks, when we've got the last one coming up. It's on the events page of our website, so people can see it there, and that's outside Riverside, one housing group and Notting Hill Genesis head offices. They're in London because these are all kind of big London-based housing associations. But I think they've been a real success. They've been a great way to meet activists.
Well, I'll put a link here to the events page so people can find it for themselves. That will be there hovering above my head. Have you had any response from the housing providers that you've been protesting outside of their buildings? Have there been any comment or feedback?
No, we haven't. I think, we had found we were meeting with the executives and they weren't really listening to us.
Mm.
And we felt that we needed to do a lot more that was agitational to really start getting these executives to see us and hear us, really. As you say, the lengths that they will go to shut you out is quite incredible, really. So although we were meeting with them and they were sitting and letting us talk about what the issues were, we haven't really seen any change from the meetings that we were having with the executives. So obviously, you then have to move it into the kind of agitation, protest, social media. So that's why we've concentrated a little bit more over the summer on those. We will go back to the executives with the strategic issues. I mean, we're not getting in touch with these executives to say Fred Bloggs needs his tap fixed,
Yeah.
which might be a really big issue for Fred Bloggs. We are going to them with the kind of collective strategic experience and strategic demands that people, feel, or strategic changes that people need to see so that these organizations are a bit better governed and a bit better run. We are starting to see some of that. So Southern are now talking about really quite radical changes to the way that they do their service charging, for example.
Yeah.
And that's been really important, that whole campaign that we've run around service charges and will continue to run. So we'll be able to get a feel come the end of this year, we'll be able to get a feel whether that really is starting to make a difference. And I think that's a really good example for others to follow if they really clean that up a bit.
Yeah, I was having a conversation earlier today, and I won't mention her name because she doesn't want to, but we both know her, about the upcoming court case that she has over her service charge and the fact that
Oh yeah,
so much of the math is incorrect on the length of her tenancy, and the fact that the VAT
yeah,
is on a company that's no longer functioning, has been dissolved. And you think, well, how can we trust them? How could this possibly go into
yeah,
court when they can't provide receipts? All they can't
yeah,
be certain in their own procedures that the math is right, and clearly isn't from
yeah,
from what she shared with me. Um, and I've
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, service charge is a big one for me. Okay, well look, August the 10th, if my head's right, is the Saturday that you're
Yeah,
next
yeah.
protesting. Well, I have my court case on the 6th of August, so assuming I'm not in prison, I will be there on
Ah,
August the 10th. Yeah.
that'd be fantastic.
Fantastic for me being in prison, or fantastic to be there in London.
We'll come and visit you if you are in prison. We'll do a little protest outside the jailhouse.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, make me a cake with an eye on it. My wife has threatened to sell my camper van, so she's got bail money for me. You leave me in prison,
Oh no!
I'll stay in prison. Suze, it's been lovely catching up with you. Let's do it again in a few weeks. There's always lots to talk about, and it's always nice to catch up. Yeah, that's brilliant. Oh, look, and there we go. It's telling me we've got 10 minutes
Brilliant.
left anyway. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Suze. See you next
Thank
time.
you.
Bye bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Ben. Take care. Bye now.
There you go. Food for thought indeed. It's always insightful talking to Suze and the great work that they're doing over at SHAC. If you're a resident who feels alone, isolated, or just not being heard by your landlord, and you're looking for advice, guidance, or support, or just to be with like-minded people and to realise that you're not alone, then SHAC, you can find them by scanning this QR code or the website address here. Get yourself over to there and sign up. The housing sector was always about building a sort of bridge between resident and provider, because it's clear, and it's becoming clearer and clearer to me with every passing day, that residents aren't being heard by housing associations, and the small sort of token gesture that they do with that. We listen to the voice of our customers, our customer panel. It's true that many of the residents just don't get heard. And that's what this platform's about. So if you have a gripe, a grievance, or a celebration and you're a resident, then we want to hear from you. If you're a housing association, housing sector professional, and you want to respond, or you want to get involved in the conversation, or you want to help bridge that gap, then again, get in touch. The next episode of the housing sector webcast will be out next week, Monday. The Green Square Accord Resident Support podcast, the GSA Way, will be out on Friday. Now, I am in court tomorrow, Tuesday, 6th of August. I am in court with Green Square Accord, who, desperate to shut down and silence the voice of the residents, of someone who's raised valid concerns that have been validated not only by me but by the Housing Ombudsman, Wiltshire Council. It goes on and on. So look, it's not just about me, it's not just my voice, but I'm the one that they can silence down. I'm the one that they keep taking to court. So I promise you that the next episode of This Is the GSA Way is going to be one that you won't want to miss. All being well, assuming I'm not in prison, that will be out on Friday. Until then, have a great week. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for listening to the Housing Sector Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends and colleagues. Your support helps us continue to bring you the latest updates and discussions on housing issues. Stay tuned for our next episode, and don't forget to follow us on our social media sites for more content and updates.